Litter is produced by the individual behavior, yes, but the disposable packaging that creates litter is produced by corporate decisions. The narrative that emerged and calcified in public consciousness was that the waste problem was caused by irresponsible consumers and could be addressed through public education and better personal habits, not through regulations that would require manufacturers to change how they designed and sold their products. It was corporate ingenuity at the highest level. Welcome back to Threat Level Red. I'm Charles Denyer. This is part 3 of Buried Beneath Us, our investigation into the American landfill crisis and the economic system that makes it not just possible, but inevitable. In part 2, we went into the chemistry of landfills, the leachate seeping into groundwater, the methane rising into the atmosphere, and the communities bearing the health consequences of both. We saw that the industry's central promise, containment, is at best a partial and temporary truth, and at worst a deliberate misrepresentation of what landfilling actually does to the surrounding environment. Today we're pulling back further, because the landfill is not the origin of the problem. The landfill is the endpoint, the final destination of a system of production and consumption that was deliberately designed to generate the maximum possible volume of waste, and then to ensure that no one in the production chain ever had to pay the full cost of disposing of it. The throwaway economy did not happen by accident. It was engineered and lobbied into existence. And the corporations that engineered it have spent 50 years and hundreds of millions of dollars making sure you understand the problem as a story about consumer choices rather than a story about corporate design.
Welcome to Threat Level Red, a Charles Denyer Productions podcast. Every week, Charles brings his real-world expertise to the front lines of America's most pressing threats. Cyber attacks, extremist networks, rogue states, terrorism, economic instability, systemic breakdowns, and so much more. From the digital battleground to the streets of America, no threat is left uncovered. No spin, no filters, just intel.
The modern throwaway economy has a traceable origin. In the years immediately following World War II, American manufacturers faced a peculiar problem. The productive capacity they had built to supply the war effort was now surplus to peacetime demand. The solution that emerged from the confluence of post-war prosperity, new petrochemical manufacturing capabilities, and deliberate corporate strategy was the disposable product. Goods designed not to be repaired, refilled, or returned, but to be used once and discarded. The paper and packaging industries were among the earliest and most aggressive adopters of this model. In 1955, Life magazine ran a now infamous photo spread celebrating what it called the throwaway living, a staged image of a family surrounded by the disposable products that would supposedly liberate the American household from the drudgery of washing and maintaining reusable items. Single-use paper plates, plastic cups, aluminum foil pans, disposable napkins. The article framed the mass generation of garbage as a form of domestic liberation. The photograph was a marketing document, not journalism. However, it captured something real about the direction that corporate America had decided the consumer economy was going to go.
The future of plastics is bright indeed, and Rogers is a company that intends to stay out in front, broadening still further its already extensive line of products made of plastic.
The shift from returnable to non-returnable beverage containers illustrates the pattern with particular clarity. As late as the 1950s, virtually all beer and soft drink bottles in the United States were returnable, sold with a deposit, collected after use, washed and refilled. The refillable bottle system was efficient. It reduced waste dramatically, and it worked. The beverage industry eliminated it deliberately and strategically, transitioning to one-way containers, first cans, then non-returnable glass bottles, then plastic, not because consumers demanded the change, but because one-way containers were more profitable for manufacturers. They eliminated the cost and logistics of collection and return. They allowed for more aggressive retail distribution, and they made brand differentiation through distinctive packaging much easier. The industry lobbied against deposit legislation that would have preserved the returnable system, and it largely succeeded. By 1970, non-returnable containers represented a majority of the market. By the 1980s, the returnable bottle had become a relic. And the transfer of waste disposal costs from manufacturers to consumers and communities did not happen silently. By the early 1960s, the proliferation of disposable packaging had produced a visible litter problem that was generating public resentment and beginning to attract legislative attention. The industry's response to this threat is one of the most instructive case studies in the history of corporate public relations. In 1953, a coalition of major packaging and beverage companies, including Coca-Cola, Anheuser-Busch, Dixie Cup, and Reynolds Metals, created an organization called Keep America Beautiful. The stated mission was to combat litter. The actual mission, understood clearly by its founders and documented in internal records that have since become public, was to shift public attention and political pressure away from corporate responsibility for the waste stream and toward individual consumer behavior. In short, to reframe a structural problem, which was the mass production of disposable packaging with no system to handle it, into a behavioral problem, one caused by irresponsible individuals who didn't properly dispose of their trash. And Keep America's Beautiful most famous product was their Crying Indian advertisement and became one of the most recognized public service announcements in American television history. The advertisement features a Native American man, played in an irony that industry likely appreciated by an Italian-American actor, paddling through polluted waterways and watching litter accumulate on roadsides, then ending with a single highly memorable tear running down his cheek. The tagline, "People start pollution, people can stop it." The message is elegant in its misdirection. The pollution is real, but the cause identified is false. Litter is produced by the individual behavior, yes, but the disposable packaging that creates litter is produced by corporate decisions. Keep America Beautiful spent decades and hundreds of millions of dollars ensuring that the public understood it was their problem, and it was their moral responsibility to clean up their act, stop littering, engage in recycling, and keep America clean.
Hi, I'm Woodsy Owl. In order to try and stop pollution, we need more help.
And there were other campaigns, such as Woodsy Owl in the late 70s, reminding us all to not pollute. The consequences of this campaign for waste policy were substantial and long-lasting. Bottle deposit legislation, which would have dramatically reduced packaging waste by making manufacturers economically responsible for end-of-life collection, was defeated in state after state, in part through Keep America Beautiful lobbying efforts and public relations infrastructure. And at the federal level, proposed packaging regulations were killed in committees in Congress. The narrative that emerged and calcified in public consciousness was that the waste problem was caused by irresponsible consumers and could be addressed through public education and better personal habits, not through regulations that would require manufacturers to change how they designed and sold their products. It was corporate ingenuity at the highest level. So here's the reality that should be at the center of every conversation about landfills in America, but almost never is. A massive share of what we produce is designed to be used briefly and then thrown away. Not years later, not decades later, but almost immediately. A significant portion of the U.S. waste stream is made up of packaging and short-lived consumer goods, items used once, sometimes for minutes, before becoming waste. That is not incidental. It reflects a system where disposability has become a defining design principle of the modern consumer economy. Products are now made with limited lifespans, difficult or impossible to repair, and composed of materials that are not easily recyclable in most municipal systems. Packaging, meanwhile, is engineered for shelf appeal and brand differentiation, serving its purpose in hours, then entering the waste stream forever. The result is an economy that is extraordinarily effective at what it is designed to do: rapidly convert natural resources, energy, and materials into short-term consumption, and ultimately into landfill volume. So the environmental economists who study material flows use the term linear economy to describe this system, a system in which materials flow in one direction only, from extraction to production to use to disposal, with no serious mechanism for recovery or reuse at any stage. The alternative, a circular economy in which materials are recovered and reused, has been the subject of substantial policy discussion in Europe and to a lesser extent in the United States. The American waste industry has a structural interest in ensuring that discussion does not translate into policy, because a circular economy is an economy that needs fewer landfills, which means fewer profits for the industry. So the waste management and packaging industry's lobbying record on extended producer responsibility, the policy mechanism that would require manufacturers to fund and manage the collection and recycling of the products they sell, is one of the most documented examples of successful regulatory capture in environmental policy history. Extended producer responsibility, or EPR, is not a radical idea. It is standard policy in most of the developed world. Germany, for example, has had producer responsibility for packaging since 1991. The European Union has applied it across multiple product categories. Canada has implemented it in most provinces. In countries with functioning EPR systems, recycling rates are substantially higher than in the United States, and the cost of waste management does not fall primarily on municipal governments and taxpayers. In the United States, EPR legislation has been introduced in dozens of states over the past 30 years, but with little to no success. The plastics industry, the packaging industry, the consumer goods manufacturers, and the waste management companies that profit from the current system have consistently organized through trade associations, including the American Chemistry Council, the Plastics Industry Association, and the Consumer Brands Association, to defeat or greatly water down or delay EPR legislation at the state level. They have funded opposition research, run advertising campaigns framing EPR as a tax on consumers, and deployed lobbyists to state capitals in numbers that community environmental organizations simply cannot match. The results are visible in the American recycling rate, which languishes around 32% for municipal solid waste, compared to recycling and composting rates of 45 to 65% in Germany, South Korea, and several other countries with functioning producer responsibility systems. The waste that does not get recycled goes somewhere. That somewhere in America is still overwhelmingly the landfill. The industry that profits from that arrangement has invested heavily in ensuring it stays that way. That's where we end Part 3. In Part 4, we're going to look at the regulatory system that is supposed to govern all of this, the EPA's landfill rules, the enforcement record, the resource gaps, and the political machinery that has consistently ensured that the agencies charged with protecting public health from the waste industry are outgunned and underfunded. Stay with us.
Threat Level Red is a Charles Denyer Productions podcast. For more information, visit charlesdenyer.com to learn more about current and upcoming podcasts and episodes, current and future book publications, professional services offered by Charles, and much more. All opinions expressed are those of the host and do not reflect the official positions of any government agency, military branch, or national security organization.